thank you so much for having me here. As a guest, I must also offer my gratitude to the Multnomah, Tualatin, Cathlamet, Nokomis, Cowlitz, Kalapuya, and Molalla people who have stewarded this land for generations and continue to be here with us today. Stories are powerful. They are how we make meaning of the world. It's not data. I'm taking my shoes off. It's not data or facts that give us an understanding of life. Stories. Stories can give us comfort, like the stories I used to tell my kids, make up for them for their bed. They can also scare the crap out of us, like the ones that we told as Girl Scouts when I was a Girl Scout around the campfire. Are also like lots of scary stories. Our friends would, on sleepovers, right? We tell ghost stories to each other. They have the power to build understanding and empathy and create division and suspicion. Stories create our truths. We the People is a story. One version of the story is about the American dream. This idea that any individual with determination and hard work and a little talent can seize the opportunity that is waiting for them and become successful. This story is so compelling that millions of people, many of our ancestors, voluntarily left their homes and traveled thousands of miles to start a life here. And we love stories that support this greater mythology, especially if they involve overcoming odds. It's the immigrant who got a job at a university as a 16-year-old and then became the president of that university as an adult. It's the person who sent their first book to 50 publishers and got 50 rejection letters before the 51st gave them a deal and said yes, and they became a best-selling author. Or the business mogul who kept losing money on various ventures before their big breakthrough made them millions. It's the child who escaped to the United States from a war-ravaged country as a refugee and became a prima ballerina. These stories about perseverance of the human spirit reassure us that even in the face of inequality, disadvantaged beginnings, and bad luck, there is hope. If we work a little harder, a little smarter, we can make it. The American dream is about conquering obstacles. It's about moral discipline, the sacrifice, struggle, and self-determination of the individual. I certainly want to believe that I'm in control of my own destiny, that with the will of my mind, the fierceness of my conviction, and my own righteous struggle, I can become America's next best-selling author, or millionaire entrepreneur, or superstar ballerina. Okay, might be too late for the last one. But you know what I mean. But the story about America is a lie. When the founders said people, they did not actually mean all the residents of the United States. These land-owning white men were thinking about people whose class, race, and gender matched their own. The indigenous people whose land we stand on were included. Black people, women, and poor people did not have the same rights and protections as well-heeled men. Voting, owning property, starting a business, moving, marrying, parenting, were all things around which your ability to make decisions were restricted if you were a woman, or black, or poor, or of course any combination of those things. And when you say, we the people, and you leave out most of the people, you make personhood conditional. And those stories we love, the ones about triumph and overcoming odds, are dangerous because they valorize the idea that an individual alone can make it. That you can be stronger than the obstacles that for most of us include wide-reaching systems of discrimination, systems that were put in place in the beginning of our nation. The heroes in our favorite success stories are exceptional. And while exceptions can exemplify our aspirations, they should not be our standard. Because not everybody is an exception or extraordinary. By definition, a lot of us are average. And many of us will fail, in part because the system is set up that way. The fact that a full-time minimum wage job is not enough to get by is not something people should have to overcome. Yeah. The fact that public education, particularly in low-income communities, is chronically underfunded is not something that people should have to rise above. The fact that acquiring the healthcare and the drugs that many of us need to stay alive, like insulin, is increasingly out of financial reach is not something that anyone should have to solve for with a can-do attitude or grit. No one should have to be a superhero to get ahead. No one should have to be extraordinary to be afforded the things they need to live. No one should have to demonstrate that they are above average to be considered deserving. But like fish who don't notice the water in which they swim, many of us have a hard time seeing and acknowledging the contours, rules, and design of ubiquitous systems and power structures that we function inside of. Those of us who are making it, we want to believe that we deserve our success because that means that the wealth and power and resources that we have is earned. But if we hold tight to that reasoning, then the inverse must also be true, which is that those who haven't made it haven't earned it. And it must be because they didn't work hard enough, or don't have a strong moral character, or, as some believe, they're just inferior. The American Dream story says that inequality exists because some people are deficient, not because our systems are built that way. But these systems, which are built with the brick walls and glass ceilings of classism and racism and sexism, build barriers for some and clear pathways for others, depending on which identities we hold. We need a new story. Yeah. We need this new story of America that tells us this. All of us are born deserving. Our worthiness, our value as human beings, is intrinsic to our very existence. Not something we have to earn, and not something we can unearn. No matter how much or how little we get paid, what mistakes we make, or systems of oppression we're subject to, no matter how kind or how flawed each of us is, simply because we exist, we should have access to the things we need to live a life of well-being. And as the wealthiest nation in the world, we have no excuse for not ensuring this for every resident of our country. Right. Yes. Yeah. As Dr. King spells out for us in Letter from Birmingham Jail, which contains nearly infinite wisdom, and you should read at least once a year, we are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. He reminds me that the toxic individualism and isolationist independence of the American dream is bad for all of us. Racism harms people of color. Let me tell you, it sucks. But it's not good for white people either. Sexism hurts women and gender nonconforming folks, but it also deeply limits men. And capitalism extracts from poor and middle class people and from our planet, and it builds fear and greed in the hearts of the wealthy. When we divide people into deserving and undeserving, which is what we do in those systems depending on where we are dividing them into human and less human. And in doing so, we make monsters of ourselves. So what do we do about this? How do we actually get ourselves to let go of this old story about what success looks like and who should have it, to create a new one in which we recognize that success is a collective endeavor, that connection and care are the values we should use to measure our achievements, that there's more than enough for all of us. To write a new story of America, we need look no further than the very families and communities that our culture has cast as broken, dysfunctional, and deviant. The models for deep connectedness are in queer ballroom culture in New York and DC, where people create family in response to homophobia and transphobia. It's in Detroit. Oh, I just got choked up. Where groups of elders patrol their neighborhood with walkie-talkies during the day to keep their communities safe because law enforcement doesn't. There's a lot going on in the world right now. Whew. It's among the collectives of sex workers who, in the face of misguided policies, devise low-tech methods to keep themselves safe. It's in the neighborhood philanthropy that pays for a young person's textbooks and an elder's prescription. It's in the sharing and bartering that happens in the encampments of unhoused people all over Oakland and probably all over Portland as well. Yeah. In deep East Oakland, there is this extraordinary community called Homefulness. They got some rich people to give them money to buy some land, and they have built housing there. In addition to the housing they have a school. I have this, I'm just not drinking it. Yes, y'all get my sexy voice. courtesy of pneumonia. I'm fine. So in addition to this housing they have a school where they are unschooling their children and the children of anybody else who wants to send their kids there. They have a radio station. Yeah. They have this amazing garden with chickens and goats and food. They have a cafe. They publish books and newsletters. They provide wraparound trauma support for people in their community. And it's all put together with, chewing gum and duct tape, for sure, but is extraordinary. When I visit there, I am this is what it's supposed to be like, right? All of this was created by formerly and currently unhoused people. And this is a community of people that our systems of safety and support have not just failed, but have actively harmed. So they figured it out themselves. And it's in communities like theirs that we find proof that another world is not just possible, but it is emerging all around us. People don't survive racism and xenophobia and homophobia and gender discrimination and poverty without developing extraordinary skills and systems and practices of support. So all we have to do is open our eyes to the examples of connectedness and generosity and abundance that exist in places that we humans struggle the most. Too often, in our efforts to fix the damage that's wrought by injustice, we focus on what we think we can do for or to other people, and we ignore the necessity of our own transformation and healing. We have to do that. We need to focus on ourselves, because while injustices are wrought by these massive systems. Those systems are run by people. And those people's trauma and pain or fear or dissatisfaction or loneliness perpetrate harm and injustice through the systems. The upside is that those people healing their wounds and finding wholeness and belonging could create the justice that we need in the world. We are those people. This is not an invitation to navel gaze or slide down a rabbit hole of self-absorption, but to reclaim our humanity and find a path back to ourselves through the mutuality and connection and courageous vulnerability that I see in these communities all over Oakland mostly, but all over the country. I know that the way to create a better world for ourselves and the world that we owe those who come after us is only something that can be achieved in the company of others. And I'm excited by a future in which all of us is cared for and loved so deeply that we give freely to others because we know we have enough. I also know that while we work to build that world, I really fear what's coming. For the first time in my 46 years, I find myself believing that we may be headed for the kind of disaster that we won't recover from. But the only protection against the worst case scenario is also in community. We, the people, we need each other, either way and always. Thank you.
Thank you.